buying an iPhone in 2026 might actually be a mistake, because Apple could be preparing something so different for 2027 that it might make every current smartphone look outdated overnight. I'm talking about the iPhone 20, and the leaks suggest this won't be a normal upgrade. Apple is reportedly working on a completely new design that looks like it came straight out of a sci-fi movie. Today I'm going to show you 10 major leaks about the iPhone 20, and if even half of them turn out to be true, 2027 could completely change what we expect from an iPhone. Hey guys, Lucifer here. Let's start with the biggest change. Apple is reportedly planning a completely bezel-less display for the iPhone 20. Not smaller bezels, not thinner bezels, but a screen that completely eliminates them. The display would flow perfectly from corner to corner with no visible borders interrupting the experience. Imagine holding a phone where the screen stretches across the entire front like a single piece of living glass. Think about the ultra-clean glass interface Apple has been pushing recently. And now imagine that idea turned into hardware where the display itself feels like it's floating inside the phone. But that raises an obvious question. If the screen covers everything, where do the cameras and sensors go? That's where the second leak changes things. Apple is reportedly exploring a display that curves around all four sides of the device. This isn't like the curved phones we saw years ago, where only the left and right edges bent slightly. The iPhone 20 could have a display that wraps smoothly across the entire front and flows into the sides of the phone, creating the illusion that the screen is part of a continuous glass surface. When you hold it, the display would appear to melt into the frame, making the phone look less like a piece of hardware and more like a futuristic slab of glass. And that leads to leak number 3, which is the overall design language Apple might be going for. With the display wrapping around the sides, the iPhone 20 could look like it was carved from a single piece of crystal-like glass. The front, the sides, and possibly even the back would flow together with almost no visible breaks. Compared to the flat-edge design we've had for years, this would feel like a completely different generation of iPhone design. Now here's where things get even more interesting. Apple is reportedly working on placing Face ID completely under the display. That means the dynamic island could finally disappear. Instead of seeing sensors and cutouts at the top of the screen, the Face ID system would sit beneath the display and activate only when needed. The technology works by allowing certain pixels to temporarily become transparent so the sensors can read your face. When you're unlocking the phone, the sensors activate. And when you're watching videos or scrolling through apps, the display behaves like a normal uninterrupted screen. But Apple might go even further than that. The front camera itself could also move under the display. That means no punch hole, no notch, and no camera cutout interrupting the screen. When you open the camera app or start a video call, a tiny portion of the display becomes transparent, so the camera can see through it. The moment you close the camera, that area returns to being normal display pixels, and the camera completely disappears from view. Think about what that means in real life. A phone with no bezels, no notch, no punch hole, and no visible camera anywhere on the front. Just a perfectly clean display that stretches across the entire device. Now let's shift from design to something Apple has been quietly trying to control for years, the camera hardware itself. Right now, Apple relies heavily on Sony for camera sensors, but reports suggest Apple is developing its own custom HDR sensor from scratch. This is similar to what Apple did with its chips. Instead of relying entirely on outside companies, Apple designs the hardware itself so it can optimize everything around its own software and image processing. A custom sensor could dramatically improve HDR photography, produce more accurate colors, capture more detail in shadows and highlights, and significantly improve low-light performance. In other words, the camera might not just get better. It could become completely optimized for the way Apple processes images. But the design changes might go even further than most people expect. With the display wrapping around the sides, Apple could remove physical buttons entirely. No volume buttons and no traditional power button. Instead, the sides of the phone would become touch-sensitive control areas built into the display surface itself. Because these controls are digital, they could change depending on what you're doing. When you rotate the phone to take photos, the side controls might turn into zoom sliders or camera shortcuts. When you're listening to music, they could become volume controls, and during calls, they might display call options. Instead of fixed buttons that always do the same thing, the phone would have controls that adapt in real time. That kind of flexibility could completely change how people interact with their phones. But one of the biggest upgrades might actually be something people complain about every single year: battery life. The iPhone 20 could use silicon anode battery technology, which allows batteries to store significantly more energy in the same physical space. That means Apple could keep the battery size similar to today's iPhones, but pack in far more capacity. Combine that with Apple's efficient processors and modems, and we could finally see iPhones that easily last 2 full days of heavy use instead of barely making it through one. Fast charging could also improve because silicon batteries handle charging cycles more efficiently than traditional lithium batteries. And the final leak might hint at where Apple thinks smartphones are heading next. The iPhone 20 might introduce a new type of memory designed specifically for artificial intelligence. Instead of relying only on traditional RAM, Apple could add dedicated AI memory built for machine learning tasks. This specialized memory would handle things like image processing, voice recognition, Siri requests, and real-time translations separately from the rest of the system. The result would be AI features that feel almost instant. Editing photos, recognizing objects, translating languages, or running on-device AI models could happen dramatically faster because the phone has hardware designed specifically for those tasks. When you combine all of these leaks together, the picture becomes pretty clear. A completely bezel-less display, a screen wrapping around the device, hidden cameras and Face ID, no physical buttons, custom camera sensors, next-generation batteries, and dedicated AI hardware. That doesn't sound like a normal yearly upgrade. It sounds like Apple trying to reinvent the iPhone from the ground up. And that might not be a coincidence. 2027 marks the 20th anniversary of the iPhone, which is exactly why many analysts believe Apple is saving something special for that year. Of course, these are still leaks and rumors, and Apple could change details before the final product arrives. But if even half of these features become real, the iPhone 20 could easily become the biggest redesign in the history of the iPhone. And honestly, that's why some people believe upgrading in 2026 might feel like buying the last version of the old design before something completely new arrives. But here's the interesting part. If Apple really is preparing a massive redesign for the iPhone 20, the question becomes what they plan to do with the iPhone lineup just before it arrives. Because the early leaks about the next iPhone generation before the iPhone 20 are already starting to surface. And some of them suggest Apple is testing ideas that could lead directly into that futuristic design. This is Guys Tech, and I will see you in the next one.